Thank you for joining us today for PNB is Listening, a series that is a collaboration between PNB artists and staff to provide an opportunity to hear from various voices in our community. I'm Andrew Hoge, a writer, marketing professional, and event designer here in Seattle, and I have served as a proud board member of PNB's Young Patron Circle for the past 5 years. I'm excited to be your moderator today, and my gender pronouns are he and him. Today, I'll be speaking with Joshua Grant and Christopher Dariano about dancing as a member of the LGBT+ community and gender identity. Full information for all of us speaking today can be found on pnb.org/listening, along with links to other work. Joshua trained at Northwest Florida Ballet, Herod Conservatory, and Pacific Northwest Ballet School. He joined PNB as an apprentice in 2001 and was promoted to Corps de Ballet in 2002. He later joined the National Ballet of Canada before dancing with the Ballet Trocadero de Monte Carlo as a principal dancer. Thank you. Joshua rejoined PNB as a member of the Corps in 2011 and was promoted to soloist in 2015. Christopher Dariano was raised in the Bronx, New York, and studied at Ballet Tech, the School of American Ballet, and Pacific Northwest Ballet School. He joined Pacific Northwest Ballet as an apprentice in 2017 and was promoted to the Corps later that year. Christopher has danced with Lunge Dance Collective and has choreographed for the Seattle International Dance Festival and PNB's Next Step. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for joining us today. Yay. Okay, so I wanted to start off talking today. Let us know a little bit of insight into your career as a dancer thus far. What inspired you to pursue ballet? And we'll start with you, Joshua.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I started dancing really early. Ballet and dance was kind of in my family. A lot of the women in my family danced. My aunt had a studio in North Carolina, and another aunt of mine danced with New York City Ballet for a couple of years. But my mom would go and take ballet classes all the time, and all the way through her college and being an adult, of course. But I would go and watch, and apparently at like 2 or 3 years old, I would stand outside and watch into the studios, and I would mimic the port de bras, and I would try and do the steps. So they put me into it, and I just got stuck. I never left. I tried to quit a whole bunch of times in my teenage years, and my teachers were always like, "Fine, quit," and I'd be like, "All right, whatever, I won't quit." So I just kept coming back, and that's how I got started. And yeah, that's it.
Excellent. How about you, Christopher?
So I started dancing when I was about 6 years old with gymnastics and hip hop and jazz and tap, and then I started doing competitions kind of in the tri-state area near New York. And then I went to school called Ballet Tech, and I got to do more of my ballet training there and was exposed to dancing in a theater and dancing in like a big studio for, you know, actual donors and patrons and audiences. So yeah, that's where I kind of started transitioning to ballet. And then I went to School of American Ballet and fell in love with ballet all over again. And then, yeah, I ended up here.
Excellent. Well, today's conversation is all about dancing and being a part of this wonderful community that we're all in. And I wonder if both of you can share a little insight and what it's like to dance as a member of the LGBT+ community.
I'll go.
Start with you, Joshua. Yes, please.
Do you mean like as a kid or professionally now?
Yeah, let's start off kind of growing up in it. I mean, you know, the dance training is difficult and hard, and you are becoming a person for so many years, not to mention learning more about yourself and learning to express your own identity. And I wonder how that manifested itself while training.
Well, I grew up in small town. Well, I grew up in a lot of different places. I had a military father, and so we moved around a lot. But I consider Northern Florida home, and it's real small down Florida, lots of closed-minded people, I'll say that. And so I had to keep the fact that I was training in dance a secret from everybody. The only people that knew that I danced, of course, was my school and my family, and a few friends that I had that were both friends from school and from the ballet school. But I remember I was in, I think it was grade 5, that we were at the water park, and somebody, some new girl that had come to town was like, "Oh yeah, I take ballet classes. Oh yeah, Josh takes too." And then all of a sudden it was out, and yeah, I caught a lot of flack for it. There was that assumption that just because you're a ballet dancer that you're gay, which in my case turned out to be true, but that's not always the case. And so it was pretty rough. It was pretty rough. It made me kind of doubt whether or not I should be, at one point in time, I was also taking Taekwondo. I think that's the one I was taking. But I remember that I used to tell people that I was taking ballet to help my Taekwondo with the flexibility and the coordination, which was complete BS. But I kept having to make excuses for it, or felt like I needed to make excuses for it. Well, why I was this boy in dance. So yeah, it was tough growing up. It was really tough.
Thank you for sharing. How about you, Christopher?
Yeah, for me, when I first started with competitions, I was the only boy in my studio, so I was surrounded by a lot of, female energy, which, is my preferred energy to be around even now. But I was always surrounded by women and girls my age. So I never really had another guy in the studio, that was either very masculine or, a little more feminine, until I went to a different studio, and my main teacher, my director, was very flamboyant. He took a lot of inspiration from kind of the gay scene, the drag scene in the 90s. We would always listen to that kind of music, and our jazz dances would be based off of like RuPaul songs and stuff. But at the time, it was just like, oh, I was just seeing other, men, other people being who they want to be. And my mom accepted it, my dad accepted it, everyone in the studio accepted it. It was just kind of like, these are the terms, and you meet it, and you're going to be open, you're going to be happy, you're going to trust and dance and who you're surrounded by. So growing up, it was not anything that was talked about. It was just kind of implemented in my world, which I'm really happy about. And being from New York City too, I was surrounded by many different types of people. So growing up, it was just kind of, you are who you are. And then obviously my teenage years, I was like, okay, maybe I don't like girls, maybe, I don't know, I should, express myself to guys and see, how that makes me feel. And yeah, it kind of helped with my dancing, and other ways it didn't. It made me more shy. But yeah, it's definitely been a journey, one that's helped me see who I am more each year of my life. But it's been a good one so far, so I'm thankful.
Excellent. I kind of want to give everyone listening a sort of peek behind the curtain, because when we talked last week, it seemed like there was a lot of who you are and how you present yourself as a dancer, and a male dancer specifically, perhaps comes from your leadership and your teachers. And I'm curious how that manifested itself as you're trying to understand your sexual and gender identity growing up. What is that like in the dancing community, ballet especially?
I feel like I had a lot of hyped up, Chris mentioned that he had a quite flamboyant teacher. A lot of my teachers were hyped up, masculine, kind of men. My teacher, my teacher, was, burly straight guy. I was the only boy that was taking class at my studio, but we had a couple of adult men that were, probably friends of friends, who would come in to do some of the male parts. And one was a truck driver, and the other one was a butch straight man. but even when, you know, as I went to schools at other schools that and trained summer courses, all of my teachers were these hyped up masculine straight men, and I wasn't that, you know, and I didn't want to, I wasn't even a dancer like that. I was a more flamboyant dancer. I didn't want to try and be this um you know, cisgendered straight man dancer, because that's not what I was. And it was weird to find, you know, my teachers kept trying to tell me, you know, dance less flowery, or dance like, you know, they always used to say, dance from your cojones, and everyone always thought that was funny. But I didn't want to dance from my cojones. I didn't. So that was hard.
So how did that, do you feel that this is something that is institutional in ballet and is passed down, you know, through the generations, and has been for a while, something that is constantly reinforced? And how did you feel, and how did you end up presenting yourself after that feedback, or throughout that feedback?
Are you asking me that?
Yes.
Or is that an open question?
No, put it up. Yeah. Anyone can answer, but it's for you.
How did I take that feedback? I always dug my heels in with that feedback, because I hated that feedback. But I also, you know, and we sort of talked about this last week too, but we also understand too, like our teachers' generation is coming from an era of dancers, and like Peter Schaffis and Peter Martins and Baryshnikov and Fernando Bajones and all of these super masculine, whatever that word means, but for this purpose, super hyped up masculinity dancers. And you know, I was talking to my husband about it after we talked last week, and he said, well, yeah, they had to be that way, because if they weren't that way, they would all be called a faggot. And you can't be called that, you know, because that's terrible, and that's a terrible thing. But it's true. They were scared of being considered gay, and they were in, you know, this female dominated art form. And so they had to prove their straighthood or their masculinity. And that generation has become our teachers. And so that's what we're being taught, is that we have to be like that. And there's a disconnect, because I think that from that time period, being gay was hush hush, and you don't talk about it. And we're in an era now where you can talk about it, and you can be gay, and it's okay for the most part. And so there's a lot more freedom that I think that our generation has that the previous generation didn't have.
Yes, that's very exciting. When we talked last week, I was really struck by the variances in your story. And Christopher, I was wondering if you could share your instructors, I believe, encouraged you to dance more princely, and there was a little bit of a hesitation to act like them over there. And I'm wondering if you could share that experience and dive into that a little bit.
Definitely. So, like I said, I went to a school called Ballet Tech, and when I went to School of American Ballet, it was a whole different, you know, playing field. Everything was, you know, to the kind of extreme. And if you didn't go watch shows, you know, over at City Ballet, you weren't doing your job, you weren't doing your homework. So when I'd go into the studios, as a 15-year-old who didn't really love ballet, I liked it, but I wasn't like necessarily drawn to it. It wasn't my natural kind of instinct. But going into those studios, my teachers, great teachers, but they would tell us, like, you have to provide, you have to be that prince, you have to be that male masculine role behind the woman. And to me, I was like, oh, that's really flattering for the woman, you know. I'm like, it's great. I want to be a good support system. I want to be somebody that's there to help. But there is also, with that, you have to be stern, you have to have your armor on, you know, you kind of have to have your guard up a little bit, you know, and kind of show just a really beautiful facade. And you know, to me, it took me a while to get that. I got the intention of, you know, dancing with somebody else. But yeah, there was definitely this pressure to be a little bit more quiet and in the background, and more masculine, and more, not aggressive, but stronger, in a way that ballet dancers means just being, I don't know, having a really strong dominating presence, but not taking over the space. And I'm a dancer that I feel like I'm pretty sensitive when I dance. I like feeling and I like emoting more than just doing tricks and looking impressive. So for me, it kind of took some time for me to realize, okay, what does Christopher have to say? Where do I fit into this equation? And it took me years after leaving that place to find that and joining, the corps de ballet, where again, you have to fit in. There's an expectation for men in dance, just like there is for women, but it's very different. It's changing, but yeah, it's definitely different.
Yes. Were either of you ever compared to other men in class or encouraged to dance like that guy over there? And is that something that is pretty frequent in class and training?
I don't really remember getting that much. I mean, it happened at some point in time, of course, but I don't really remember it much. But that's kind of a generic correction anyhow that most teachers use. Do it like Brenda does it. But Brenda's 4 feet shorter than me, and
yeah,
different.
I mean, dance is a competitive. When you're younger, dance is a competitive sport, even if you're not in competitions. You go to like a bigger school, you go to a new company, and you're not competing. Nobody labels it as that, but you have to stand your ground and you have to be seen. And if you don't look like the person that's getting praised, what are you doing wrong? So it's kind of like a psychological, mental, like, what am I doing that they're not? What are they doing that I'm not? You question a lot of things. And there are definitely teachers and even now ballet masters and stagers that are like, do you see how they did this? Like, approach it that way, do it that way, look like that. And at some point, we kind of got to break that down and be like, it's not about looking like somebody, it's about dancing the steps, the correct way, the correct form, but then adding who you are in that, do a Balanchine intended, but it's not strict. Dancing is for everyone. Dance happens everywhere. So
yes. And in kind of in researching ahead of this panel, I came across a quote that's like, movement isn't gender. Would you agree with that? How does that feel to you? How do you interpret that statement?
I want to talk about this for a second.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about your corrections. I want to bring up my correction.
Please do.
Somebody told me the other day to do a step, to not do a step feminine, but to do it masculine. And it took me a second. Like, I got really, really internal for a second. And I don't know if I was mad about it, if I was frustrated about it, or if I just was frustrated that was the way that the correction came out. But that, I mean, we do that, I think, outside of ballet. We do that in society anyhow. We assign genders to everything. A car can be a gender. Oh, she's so pretty, talking about a car, or an outfit, or but dance steps are just dance steps. We have in ballet steps that stereotypically women do and men do not do. And we have steps that stereotypically men do that women do not do. A bourrée, for example, and a bourrée, it's like when you flutter your feet across the stage, and men don't do it. And if men get asked to do it, there's always this, kind of, I'm a straight guy and I've got to do my little flutter step. And
interesting.
There's an understanding that, real men don't do those steps, that women only do those steps. But steps aren't gendered. They're just steps. I mean, I don't walk gay. Well, that's left for determination, but I don't walk gay. Somebody else doesn't walk straight. It's just, I walk how I walk. And that's what that's all it is. There's no, There's nothing gay or straight about it, or masculine or feminine about it. It's just a step. It's just a step.
I agree with that. I mean, an example of a bore, a male doing borees, oh my God, I can't say it, was I just did that solo by Albert Evans, and there's nothing very tricky about it, and I literally did borees in it, and it was great because to Peter, he just literally was like, okay, so you're just gonna do this step now, and you do this. There was no like, okay, Chris, you're gonna get ready, like you have to practice doing your fifth and bore like a woman, which honestly I have gotten before when I had to do boreas on stage and something else. Um, but it's good. It's a good sign that our director, at least, is not trying to say do this like a woman, do this like a man. He's just like, this is the step, and you're adapting to it.
Mm-hmm.
But also, like historically within dance, we have classical ballets like Giselle and Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella, and Swan Lake. And the woman does beautiful arms. She's known for port de bras. She's known for borees. She's known for like gliding across the stage. And the man is known for doing these really big jumps, really, like kind of popping explosively on stage. Um, so I think from that point, things started to get more divided, and we've kind of kept that over the years. And luckily, we have somebody like Balanchine that lets men do feminine steps, but he just kind of was like, this is dancing, and that's why so many people gravitate towards that. Same with a lot of modern day choreographers. They started to blur those lines a little bit, but again, it's who is teaching it that really matters, because they're not with us, those choreographers, anymore. It's who's passing down the torch and who's teaching it certain ways, and how are the dancers taking that. And yeah, it's really about communication now, and just saying like, you're not divided, you're all dancing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the, because last week we talked about, you both have done Mother Ginger, right? So what are some of these roles and opportunities to perhaps break down these stereotypes, and what does it take to do that, and how does even prepping for that or approaching that role, how does that manifest itself for you both?
I want to say about Mother Ginger, and it's only because the way that, and this isn't towards you, it's just the way that the sentence structure is, that Mother Ginger is, to me, actually not breaking down any stereotypes at all. And if anything, I think it's actually building up the stereotype. Put a man out on stage, and in order for him to be dressed up as a woman, or in order to him to do anything feminine, it has to be funny. And if it's not funny, then it's wrong, and then it makes people uncomfortable. Mother Ginger would never work if it was a woman going out there. Well, I don't want to say it would never work, but it wouldn't necessarily work in the same way if it was a woman going out there and doing the exact same steps. Because what makes Mother Ginger inherently funny is that it's a big strapping dude dressed up in, grandma costuming. And so I actually, I don't think necessarily that actually helps the stereotype. I think it actually hinders the stereotype. I think what I do wish that we would get to is breaking down the stereotypes, like Chris was talking about classical ballet. And I think that this is happening more with newer choreographers, but what he said is very true. The men's variations, if you turned off the music, you wouldn't know which variation was from which ballet, because they all had the same part A, part B, part C. Just flip out the music, and and whereas the women got to do footwork, and they got to move around, and they got to have musicality and to move their bodies, and that is what Balanchine, I think, gave to New York City Ballet and to the dancers to American dancers, is to be able to use your entire body, and how do you dance with your body instead of just doing the trick. And with Oh no, I totally forgot my point. I hate when I do that. But I do want to say with classical ballet, I think that with like the men's roles of, I kind of wanted to approach what we were talking about last week, and I lost my segue into it. But what we were talking about with like two men dancing together is taboo, because there's always some, you know, oh, they must be gay, or there must be some underlying story. Whereas with classical ballet, with women, two women dance together is totally fine. Two men is not totally fine. There's always something there has to be a reason why they're dancing together. And I think it's stopping that mentality that is what breaks down the stereotypes. And that was my point. I got it. I got there eventually.
Yay, excellent. Thank you.
I mean, Josh, we danced together last year in Donald Byrd's piece. We actually got to partner each other, you know, not just dance side by side. And he gave us no context at all. Yeah. It was just us dancing together, and that was the result on stage. So I completely agree with you, because, well, first of all, I would hear from my peers and, you know, audience members, like, even when I danced with Lucian, you know, for a different project, I came off stage and they're like, "You're such a beautiful couple." And I was like, why do we have to be a couple? And even with our stuff for Donald's piece, people would be like, "Oh, like, what's the story behind it? You know, like, are you leaving him?" And I'm like, okay, like, we don't have to put a narrative to everything, you know, like, it could just be dance. But it's definitely a stereotype that, you know, gay men face, even though we've been here for decades now in dance, openly and proud, you know. It's still something to this day that audience members, they put it into a category very quickly. You know, it's put into a box very quickly. And going back to Mother Ginger, for me, it was really scary because it was like a moment where I had to like be silly, you know, and it's not a serious role at all. You can't take it seriously. It loses everything. It loses all the charm. It loses the character. And for me, it was like, how do I like not take myself seriously, have fun, and like be feminine to a audience of 3,000 people with 8 kids popping out of my skirt? It was like the most daunting thing ever. And I feel like I'm naturally not the most masculine person outside of dance. You know, my personality is not like super aggressive or dominate even, but being on stage and doing a role that required to be more feminine and more myself essentially was a really good challenge. After the first show, it broke that down, and I was like, okay, you know, like, water's going down my back, you know, it's a new start, and it helped me in my dance career. I don't think it's changing the dance world at all. I think, like Josh said, it's kind of feeding into stereotypes, and having a big dude in a big dress with 8 kids under him is weird, kind of. You really think about it, it's kind of strange. It's kind of like, can a woman just pop 8 kids out like that? Like, not really. But again, it's part of the joke. It's part of the lightheartedness that Nutcracker tries to achieve, you know, for, you know, decades now. But yeah, I don't think that Mother Ginger really helps, you know, the LGBTQ plus community in any way. It helps the straight men put on drag and make them look at themselves and be like, whoa, I'm a woman, you know, I'm wearing lipstick, you know. Maybe it's good for that aspect, but being a gay man, it helped me, but it didn't change my life. It didn't like break down these barriers in my career, you know.
So what would it take to actually start breaking down those barriers? Where does the responsibility fall on either the audience or the choreographer or the dancer? Like, how can we start changing it? What needs to happen?
I think being being open-minded is one thing, but I mean that in a much broader sense than just being able to think outside. Being able to think outside the box, allowing people to choreograph ballets that are not along the exact same lines of the status quo of what ballet companies have been doing for the last 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. I think allowing choreographers to push boundaries on what is heteronormative and homonormative. Is that a word?
It is now.
It is now. Not necessarily. It's a lot easier said than done when you're a dancer in the company, but as opposed to somebody who's leading the company. But being able to take risks and putting it out on stage, and just allowing your audiences to sit with it. And I think that sometimes that's going to backfire, and you might get 20% of your audiences that say, "I never want to come ever again because you did this." And that's a real fear. But at the same time, I mean, Rome wasn't conquered in a day. You're just going to have to keep dangling the carrot in front of the audiences and saying, "Yes, but look what's happening over here," and then kind of sneaking stuff in on this side. But if you don't push the boundaries of what classical ballet can be in, 2020, then it's never going to change.
Absolutely. I think that everything you said is exactly how I feel too. And it's not only just showing them, but it's, creating a dialogue to talk about these things and to not feel like this kind of awkward, like, oh, can we talk about the two men dancing together? Like instead of going home and talking to your spouse about it or your friend, like let's have the discussion in-house. Let's talk to the people that dance it. Let's talk to the choreographer, the composer, everything that kind of went into it. Because, a ballet has a lot of moving parts. It's not just the dancer. You have a lighting designer, costume designer, everything's intentional, or at least it should be. But yeah, it's having a dialogue that feels comfortable and having an audience that's willing to speak up and talk about that, and just educating audiences and educating the youth that, like, things are changing. You don't have to be this typecasted person. Just because you're short doesn't mean you can't do a beautiful, pas de deux with somebody. Just because you're tall doesn't mean you can't do like the quick things, and we started seeing that in the 50s, 60s with Balanchine and in America. And now we're seeing, a little more gender neutral roles, but it doesn't always have to just be gender neutral. It's how do we pair people together in an organic way, that's not forced, that's not for some structure or some standard. It's just seeing things from a different lens, for the choreographer, for the artists, everybody involved, the dancers, the director, and then also the audience. It has to be full circle, and just creating dialogue, I think, is really the best way.
Excellent. Christopher, you were talking about sort of conversations and talking to the youth, and last week I posed the question: do you feel as gay men that you might have more opportunity compared to other members of our community? And I kind of wanted to pick up on that and just see sort of what your experience has been with that, and your thoughts generally.
So as far as being a dancer in the queer community, it's been great for me because I've gotten to do events, like dancers responding to AIDS, where it's directly affecting our community. I'm dancing for a cause. So that has been really amazing, because then I meet a whole catalog of different people involved, from different dance genres, and audience members that are like me and have been through, the AIDS epidemic, which was catastrophic, to say the least. But I think there's a lot more empathy in our community. I think there's a lot more understanding that there's a coming out we all have to go through. There's this door you have to hide behind. You have to be in the closet for a certain amount of your life, even if it's only for 2 or 3 years old. Like, people still assume you're a boy, you're gonna like a woman. But I think within our community, I've felt there's more empathy, and there's more understanding, and more emotional connection But being a dancer in this community, I do think I have a responsibility to help educate people and to educate myself so I can be a role model. You know, we're given such an amazing platform being in a ballet company, especially in America, you know, and we have to use it. We have to use it in the best way possible and not just kind of sit quiet anymore, because change doesn't come from sitting still, you know. It comes from action, it comes from talking about things. And yeah, I think having this discussion already is like kind of a milestone for our company, you know, creating these dialogues. But yeah.
Joshua, do you have any thoughts about that?
No, I second that.
Excellent. And then along those lines, what's a conversation that you've had that kind of pops into the top of your mind that gives you hope for the future, for younger dancers and dancers in the queer community and whatnot? What you just said in action.
I want to say one thing is that there's a friend of mine that I used to dance with at Trocadero that, and for the life of me, I don't know where the company is. It's somewhere in Europe, nor do I know the name of it. But he posts a lot of pictures of himself dancing on Instagram. And he's a man, and he is a man in a, ballet company. And every single picture that he posts, he's dancing on point. And he's in the same costumes as his, counterparts on stage. He just happens to be on point shoes. And getting back to our gender neutral steps and costumes conversation that we were having earlier, that gives me hope, seeing that. And I know in America we always think it's happening over there in Europe, and Europe is so much different. They're so different than where we are here, but it could happen here. There's nothing stopping us from moving forward. And so seeing something like that really gets me excited about the future of dance. That it's really exciting to see that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So, and along those lines, you are both obviously leaders in the community as dancers, and I want to talk a little bit about your creative process and how you go about whether you're choreographing or any sort of creative process, how everything we just talked about, how that manifests. Like, how do you wrestle with that? How do you, what do you do to sort of like get the message out or the point across that you're trying to achieve? So give us a little peek into your imagination and your creative process.
I want to say this real quick, and then I'll let you talk.
Yeah.
And nothing I ever say is real quick, but it's going along those point shoes. So creatively, last year for Next Step, I was going to have one of my male dancers dance on point, and of course, Next Step ended up getting canceled due to the COVID pandemic. And as luck would have it, there's another kid this year that is a boy who wants to dance on point. And so I'm really looking forward to using him, and hopefully I can finally be that person that gets a man on stage in a pair of point shoes, and strike down that gender. But going on to what we were saying about how do we make things change, and maybe it's because I'm a bit older now, but I have gotten to a point in my life where I try not to make apologies for what I do. And I don't feel like I need to make apologies for how I am or how I act or the choices that I make. And I guess that's why I said about, how do you interject it into the company and, get people on board? There's no apologies behind it. This is what it is. And if you don't like it, you don't like it. And that's how I approach. And I think most people who know me, I kind of wear my heart on my sleeve, and I kind of have I say whatever is in my head. I have absolutely no internal monologue. And so I just say it. I say it. And I think that that's what, that's my bit. You know, the things that I believe in and the things that I want to see happen, I want to make them happen, and I want to go for it and fight for it and make it happen, and not wait for somebody else to try and do it, or not to wait for somebody else to allow me to, or to give me the approval to do something.
So, and what is the, that's a big change from when you were growing up, I assume, that feeling. So where, like how, what allowed you to give yourself that permission, or how did you arrive into that? Is that just through the years and through your experience, or was there something that really set into motion that mindset?
I think it's partly the years, and it's partly the age, it's partly the experience, it's partly the different places I've been to. I think also, and this, not to sound cliche, but COVID's given me a very different outlook on life. You know, I think if you could see us in the studios now, what we're doing now is such a minute idea, a concept, a theory of what a ballet company is supposed to be doing, because it's all we can do. And, you know, bless our hearts for trying, and bless PNB's heart for trying to get us in the studio. I think what we're doing is amazing. But you also have to understand that as a dancer, it's this compared to what we're used to. And I think to have something that we have worked our entire lives for swept out from underneath us and completely taken away from us is hard. It's really, really hard. And I think for me personally, I've gotten to the point where I do kind of come across as quite pessimistic. And this COVID's kind of giving me this mentality of where we need to all be a little bit more collective. We all need to think about each other's feelings a little bit more. We need to be hearts open, minds open when it comes to other people and the people around us. And life is short. You only get one shot. So you can sit in the background and sit in the corner and wait for somebody else to do something, or you can step up and live your life. And I'm sick of watching. I'll say this, and to be frank, I'll just say it. I've been called a faggot one too many times in my life to not stand up for what I believe in now. And it's taken me a long time to get there, but we all hopefully get there eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when we talk and help each other, right?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Anything else?
I don't think so.
just making sure.
To go off of
yeah.
to go off what Josh was saying, thank you for that, because like as somebody that's younger, it gives me the reassurance that like I am somebody that apologizes way too much, especially in the studio. Every small thing I do wrong, I'm like, sorry. And growing up, my friends would be like, you apologize way too much, like stop that. Like, and I was like, well, I'm just trying to be nice, you know, I'm trying to be polite. And luckily my family always taught me that, you know, but at a certain point, you gotta stand your ground and you gotta be like, no, this is what I think. And honesty is the best policy. And you being honest and you being blunt only serves the world, I think, better, especially the dance world, because we all hide behind this facade. We all hide behind this, what am I supposed to be, you know, like this prestige almost. So just hearing that, I don't know, that helps me, because I am at a point in my life where I'm like discovering, especially with COVID too, discovering like I'm unapologetically me, and that's it. That's the end of the story, you know, like you're gonna accept it or you're not. But going back to what you're saying about using a dancer on point for next step this year, it's just so powerful, you know, that you are passing down your knowledge as being a man that has done point work professionally to how you use your feet, how you use your legs, how you use your body. It's so powerful. Like that's what we need more of. And it's not like a big deal. It's just integrating it, it's just giving back what you know to our community, our dance community. And yeah, I think with our works, we both, at least, what we know so far of this creative process this year, I think we aim for um, to be inclusive, and to not judge people based on how they look or how they act or how they come off, just basing them on their dance ability, their passion, how much they listen, how much they actually put into the work, you know so I think as creators, we don't want to put a stop to anything. We want to open it even wider, and then from there we can share a very specific story, a narration if you want, or an abstraction of an idea. But as creators, like, we can't be pigeonholed into like a mold again. It's like we're creating to try to like express something more and not go further back. So for me, at least, like, I get inspired a lot by culture and like how past generations have broken down and adapted to their time. Like the 60s, love the counterculture. Literally have like my Beatles stuff everywhere. But it was also just liberation for women, for people of color, for gay men, for queer people, for lesbians. It was a really big push for our society and our world. And that's what inspires me when I create. I'm like, how do I take that knowledge and take what I'm experiencing like them and put it into dance and put it into a story that people can digest and pick apart and we can talk about. But yeah, I think personally I still have a lot more to kind of finesse in my life, dance wise and in my choreography, but it's part of the journey. And yeah, having these conversations are great. It's really putting somebody like me that's younger, and just kind of starting in my career, it helps put me on track, and not lose focus and just be like, okay, this is the road where I need to go down, a liberated road. So, yeah.
That's great. I love hearing the comparison of, being taught in a particular way, but having the opportunity to translate that and do something different now. And do you feel that that's a result of being here in Seattle at PNB specifically versus other places that you've danced, having that ability to create and kind of share that information the way that you want? Or are there other things and influences that are propelling you, whether it's other creative endeavors or anything periphery?
I moved here when I was 17 or 18. Lived here for a few years, moved away, moved to Toronto for a couple of years, moved to New York for a couple of years, traveled the world, came back here to Seattle. What I love about Seattle is its open-mindedness and its caring. I have been to a lot of places, and there are, not everywhere in Europe is London or Paris. And even everyone always goes, oh, New York City, it's such a big open-minded city, but at the same time it also clusters its neighborhoods. And there is the African American neighborhood, there's the Jewish neighborhood, there's the gay neighborhood, and you're not supposed to leave your neighborhood if you're not, there are things that I really, really love about the city that allows us to be ourselves and be unique and individual. So I'm saying that in the back of my mind. I love New York City. I would move back in a heartbeat. So I don't want to offend any New Yorkers by saying about their neighborhoods. But please welcome me back with open arms if I ever do go back. But no, I think that one of the things that we have here that's amazing is our open-mindedness in Seattle. It's like no other place in the world.
Hear, hear.
I agree. I mean, being a New Yorker, you definitely are, you're put into your neighborhood and you grow up in a neighborhood and you connect to people on that. which is great, but also again, you can't put divides, between people. You can't just say you should stay here. Um, so being from New York and like having such an open mind, I was like the only white kid in my class in my fourth through eighth grade, and I'm literally Asian, so half Asian. So that says enough, about the diversity you can get there and the different kind of people. But for me, moving to Seattle, I was like, oh, it's such a small city compared to where I'm from. How am I going to like find my groove? And honestly, it's given me a lot of clarity because I live in Capitol Hill, which is pretty liberal, and I see all types of people on the street and they're welcoming, and for me, I don't have to be in the biggest city that has the most diversity in the world to be who I am. It just takes a good, powerful community to be behind you. Um, and it's funny because like in our community at PNB, there's only like four, I think, gay men in our company. I'm the only gay male in the core, which is crazy, but yeah, it's just interesting that our community is very different within this, seen as feminine art form. Um, yeah, it's really interesting, but it's helped me because it's like, oh, I'm different, and I got to celebrate that and share that a little bit more, and talk to people like Josh, and just, I don't know, get better insight. You don't need a whole army of people to lead you somewhere great. You just need one good person, two good people.
Yeah, excellent. So that's really beautiful. Thank you, both of you, for sharing that. I We're kind of nearing the end of the conversation, so I wanted to finish with one last question. Or more of a request, actually. Just imagine that there's many members of the community, especially young ones, probably watching this video, looking up to the two of you. And I'm wondering if you could share advice to them if, let's say, they're pursuing or want to pursue a career in dance and specifically ballet. What do you want to tell them?
I'm going to keep it short and concise for once. No, I'm not. Such a liar.
Go for it.
Be yourself. Be yourself. I think that's the hardest. It's one of the hardest things in dance because we're told to be, be like Brenda or be like somebody else or do it like how this person does it or watch this video and do it like how they do it. Be yourself and have no reserves about anything else except for being yourself. And there's also one other quote, and I heard it, and I can't remember who said it. It's somebody like Audrey Hepburn or something like that, but I can't remember who it was. But she said, nobody else's, it's something having to do with like nobody else's opinion matters except for yours. And other people can have their own opinions, but you don't have to hear them, or you don't need to hear, they don't mean anything, because whatever they think is whatever they think and has nothing to do with you. Obviously, it was a lot better, more eloquently spoken than that, but it's basically like, whatever other people say is none of your business. That's what it was. Whatever other people say is none of your business. That's it.
Perfect. Excellent.
I completely agree. Definitely be yourself. It is the hardest thing you could do. I feel like, there's always so much judgment, and we're in an art form that you go on stage and you're judged for your face and your body and your appearance and how well you do. So you're going to face a lot of judgment, but be yourself. Find the passion within what you're doing. I think that's really important. And also, like, listen to people, listen to those around you, listen to the critiques, and then think about how you can actually apply it for the better and not degrade yourself over that. Yeah, I think a valuable thing for me is just opening my ears, opening my eyes, and kind of seeing things with perspective, not just my own opinion, but how other people can see it and see the good in you. It doesn't always have to be bad. But yeah, I think just, open your heart up, follow your passion, show that passion, and be respectful.
listen, have good conversations, be yourself. That's great advice. Thank you to both of you. And so that will conclude the panel discussion. Thank you both for sharing your time with us and your thoughts and your feelings and your perspective. It was wonderful, and can't wait to see you on the stage sooner than later, I hope.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew.
Pleasure.